Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Winning the division is always a fun moment, especially when it happens on the final week of the season. After not knowing your fate for the entire year, by winning the division on the final week, especially in a win-or-go-home game, you officially clinch a playoff spot. And while the players are obviously thrilled about it, the fans are just as excited, if not more excited, to be watching their team play some January football. The fans are entirely on your side at this point, and the fans cannot wait to see you again and celebrate all of your accomplishments. So with that in mind, imagine your team winning the division and the fans celebrating this major accomplishment, and the celebration going so badly that by the end of it, the fans are booing you to the point where you have to publicly issue an apology for upsetting everyone. It seems that something like this would be very hard to have happen, since everyone's looking for a good time and looking to celebrate the moment, and everyone's on cloud 9 after such a monumental victory. Yet in 1988, that's exactly what happened with the Seattle Seahawks, and a celebration gone horribly wrong after they won the AFC West. And this is the story behind that. Before I talk about the celebration gone horribly wrong, we need some context to understand just what the fans were celebrating in the first place, as well as why the game in particular that they were celebrating was so important. Entering Week 16 of the 1988 season, the Seattle Seahawks were the best team in the AFC West. Granted, that's not saying a lot because the AFC West was kind of a dumpster fire, but they're the only team above 500, sitting at 8-7, and they are the only team with a positive point differential, sitting at +4. They're doing this thanks to a great defense that has allowed just 292 points all season, which is the fourth fewest in the AFC, and an offense that was finally starting to find its rhythm. When Dave Craig missed the middle of the season with a separated shoulder, Seattle's offense was floundering. But now that the season was coming to an end, the Seahawks were playing some of their best offensive football yet. Over their first 10 games, they were scoring just over 16 points per game, having the third worst offense in the AFC and a bottom 5 offense in football. Over their 5 most recent games heading into the final week, however, they were averaging 27 points per game. It was like night and day. And right behind them in the division was this team right here. The Los Angeles Raiders were not having a great season. They were 7-8, and were in the bottom half of the league in both points scored and points allowed, and were picking a bad time to play some sloppy football. After being 6-5 after 11 weeks, they had dropped 3 of their last 4 games, including an abysmal game against the 3-8 Falcons where they picked up just 9 first downs and held the ball for 22 minutes, and a loss to the Seattle Seahawks at the Kingdome by a final score of 35-27. Still, despite this atrocious play, and despite their season seemingly falling apart, amazingly enough, they were still well within the playoff picture. How in the playoff picture were they? Well, entering the final week of the season, they were set to take on Seattle again. Only this time, they were playing them at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. It was December 18th, 1988, and this might have been the biggest regular season game of the entire season across the league. The stakes were simple. The winner wins the division and the loser goes home, missing the playoffs entirely. In essence, this was a de facto playoff game for the right to be the number 3 seed and automatically advance to the divisional round. And for Seattle, considering the fact that they had never won the division before in franchise history, this game meant everything and then some. Safe to say, they did exactly what they had to do. You want to talk about an insane, incredible way to end the season? Well, it doesn't get a whole lot crazier than this. I'm sure a lot of people expected a good game between these two AFC West rivals, especially with the stakes being as high as they were. But I'm not sure anyone expected a good old-fashioned shootout. Vegas had the over-under at 40 points. We were awfully close to having both teams break that by themselves. The Raiders scored 2 touchdowns in the first half, with Tim Brown running it in from 2 yards out and Willie Gault catching a 51-yard touchdown pass from Jay Schrader. And the Seahawks scored 2 touchdowns in the first half as well, with Steve Largent catching a 35-yard touchdown pass from Dave Craig, and Brian Blades catching a 17-yard touchdown pass from Craig. As a side note, to learn more about the career of Dave Craig, click the card in the upper right corner. At halftime, the Seahawks were leading at 23-17 thanks to those touchdowns and 3 field goals courtesy of Norm Johnson. And the Seahawks continued to pour it on when the third quarter started, showing no signs of slowing down. Seattle scored 42 points the week before against the Denver Broncos, and their offense was continuing to fire on all cylinders in this one too. Craig threw 2 more touchdown passes, hitting Brian Blades from 30 yards out and John Williams from 75 yards out. Craig finished the game going 19 for 32 with 410 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 130.2. You could make a legitimate argument that this was the best game of Craig's entire career, especially considering the circumstances. Seattle had built up a 17-point lead in the third quarter, and looked like they were in complete control of the game. However, the Raiders were not going away quietly. Even though Seattle was up by 9 points with less than 3 minutes to go, that was still enough time for Los Angeles to drive down the field, eventually getting into the red zone, where they settled for a 24-yard field goal from Chris Barr to make it a 43-37 ball game. The Raiders decided to kick it deep and put their faith in their defense to make a stop. The gamble pays off, as the Raiders wind up getting it back with roughly 1 minute left, needing to drive just under 70 yards to find the end zone and win the division title. It doesn't get more stressful or better than this. Seahawks fans were on the edge of their seats, as Seattle looked like they were about to blow their 17-point lead and grasp on the division, especially when the Raiders got into Seattle territory. But after 4 straight incompletions by Schrader, Seahawks fans could breathe easy, because for the first time in franchise history, their team was the champion of the AFC West, and they were ready to celebrate. Typically in situations like this, where a team wins a big game on the road to officially clinch a playoff spot or win the division title, you'll see diehard fans gather at the airport to celebrate and greet the team. You've seen Buffalo Bills fans do this many times, notably in 2020, when they won the AFC East after defeating the Denver Broncos and got warmly greeted upon arrival. Heck, this isn't even the first time I've done a video on something like this happening, as I talked about a disaster that occurred in 1980 when Cleveland Browns fans tried to celebrate a monumental win by their team, in an airport celebration so disastrous that injuries occurred. You can learn more about that fiasco by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And there was no way that Seahawks fans weren't going to enjoy the occasion. They had been around for over a decade at this point, and while they had made many playoff appearances recently, including one the previous year in 1987, they were all as a wild card. Yes, this appearance by Seattle was their 4th in the last 6 years, so it was sort of expected under the leadership of Chuck Knox that Seattle would be a playoff team, but it still doesn't diminish the significance of winning your first division title. And Seahawks fans came by the hundreds and came by the thousands to be there when the plane landed at 9:30 p.m., and to celebrate this accomplishment with the players that they had been cheering for all season. When all was said and done, there were 3,500 fans that showed up to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport for the party. They were there to see the players. You can't have a celebration like this without the players, which is why they were all confused when Chuck Knox stood on top of a balcony somewhere in the airport and announced to the crowd that the players would not be there. Sorry, I know you came for the players, I know everyone made it seem like the players were going to be there, and I know you made signs for the players, but nope, the players are in a completely separate section of the airport for security reasons, and they're not coming to see you. Our bad. And that's when the mood very quickly soured. That raises the question, what the heck happened to cause such a controversy? Well, making this situation all the more bizarre was the fact that according to airport officials, Chuck Knox was blatantly lying about the whole situation. Knox said that this was for security purposes, but the airport officials had no idea what he was talking about. For one, they were made aware of a grand total of 0 threats. There was nothing whatsoever that indicated that the airport was a dangerous place to be that night. Number 2, airport officials had been preparing for this, and had fully been expecting a large crowd to show up. They had ample security personnel working, and had enough security guards in the area where if anything were to happen, they'd be on it right away. And number 3, a large number of people in the crowd, according to reports, were children with signs. What kind of threat does that pose? It was a bunch of families looking to have a good time, and was a bunch of kids looking to cheer on their idols. They weren't there to start any trouble. Eventually, after airport officials called out the Seahawks and Chuck Knox on the ridiculous lie that they were doing this in the name of airport security, the Seahawks had to backtrack and say a completely different reason, saying that the incident was caused because of a foul-up that sent personnel members like Knox and team president and general manager Mike McCormack in one direction and the players in another. Still, I'm not sure if that adds up either, since both groups of people are getting off on the same plane. Both groups of people have to leave at the same spot, and how many times do you see a team not travel together in that instance? Why would the players and coaches be separated? It doesn't make any sense. Plus, Knox had been with the team in some capacity since 1983, and McCormack had been there since 1982, so they had landed at Seattle-Tacoma many times before. It's not like this was a brand new thing. Either way, from all the reports of the incident, the fans went from a cheerful bunch to an upset one. You had kids crying that they wouldn't be able to see their team. You had fans who were booing their own team, the same team that they were cheering just 1 minute before and had been cheering all season. Fortunately for everyone involved, it didn't turn ugly to the point where fights broke out and where you had a mob of people pushing their way trying to run through and figure out where the players were, since again, the airport officials were ready for this and had security. But it was a sour end to what should have been an incredible day. And it was so bad, in fact, that McCormack had to issue an apology as to why the players weren't there or didn't acknowledge the crowd and just walk past them. As McCormack said, "We have to apologize to them." And unfortunately, this moment put a huge damper on the final day of the season, and was a sign of things to come. The Seahawks played the Cincinnati Bengals in the divisional round of the playoffs, and lost by a final score of 21-13. Even though the score might look close, it was nowhere near that. The Bengals had a 21-0 lead after 3 quarters, and completely destroyed Seattle when it came to running the football. Whereas the Bengals had over 35 minutes of possession and ran for 254 yards and over 5 yards per carry, the Seahawks mustered up just 18 rushing yards all day on 17 carries, and turned it over 3 times. Obviously, the celebration was not even close to the reason that the Seahawks lost the game, but I'm sure that the mood that Seahawks fans felt on that night was very similar to the mood that they were feeling watching their team lay an egg in this playoff game. The good news for Knox and the Seahawks was that they didn't have to worry about any airport celebrations for winning the division title going wrong ever again. The bad news for Knox and the Seahawks was, well, they didn't have to worry about any airport celebrations. The team would not win another division title or make it to the playoffs until 1999, long after Knox and McCormack were gone. And at least today, whatever kinks had to be worked out back in 1988 are well sorted out, as now when fans greet the team back following road games, everything seems to go off without a hitch. But everything about this situation more than 30 years ago was so bizarre. You almost have to try to get fans who are on an emotional high to turn against you hours after you just won your first division title. But if you're gonna do it, this is a pretty good way to do it. Get thousands of fans to make signs for you and greet you at the airport, then break their hearts by saying that there was no celebration, then make things even worse by lying and saying that this was a security issue, to the point where airport officials have to turn against you and publicly refute that statement. Yet on December 18, 1988, in one of their greatest moments in franchise history at the time, the Seahawks somehow did all of these things and got the 12th man to turn against them. Get your official Jaguar Gamer 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9, and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.